I never thought I'd sit down to write about a single dinner that would change everything I believed about my family. But here I am, still sorting through the emotions and memories of that night, trying to make sense of it all. My name is Charlotte and I'm 58 years old. I've lived through countless Thanksgivings, Christmases and Sunday dinners, convinced I had seen it all. But this was different. It was late October and the crisp autumn air made me pull my sweater a little tighter. Our family gatherings had always been a mix of warmth and tension, equal parts laughter and subtle jabs. My father, who remarried 5 years ago after my mother passed away, had invited us all over for dinner. His wife Marion was hosting. Marion is a force of nature. In her mid-60s but looking a decade younger, she's the kind of woman who can silence a room just by walking into it. She isn't unkind, but she has a way of commanding attention that's both captivating and intimidating. Our relationship had always been polite but distant, an unspoken understanding that she was part of my father's new life, while I remained a piece of his old one. When I arrived that evening, the house smelled of roasted garlic and rosemary, and the soft voice of Ella Fitzgerald played in the background. The dining room glowed with flickering candlelight, and the table was set with Marion's signature elegance, crisp white linens, crystal glasses and an autumnal centerpiece of gourds and dried leaves. As always, everything was perfect. The rest of the family trickled in. My brother Jack and his wife, my 2 grown children and Marion's daughter from a previous marriage, Allison. We fell into our usual rhythm of small talk and wine pouring, the kind of surface-level chatter that kept old wounds safely buried. Dinner began smoothly. Marion served a butternut squash soup so beautifully plated that it almost felt wrong to eat it, followed by a roasted chicken so tender it nearly fell off the bone. Conversation flowed effortlessly. Jack shared stories about his latest fishing trip. My daughter talked about her new job, and Marion contributed just enough charm to keep the energy lively. But something felt different about her that night. There was a restlessness in her demeanor, as if she were carrying a heavy, invisible weight. Then during dessert it happened. Marion brought out a homemade apple tart, its golden crust glistening under the dining room lights. We were mid-bite when she cleared her throat and stood up, her hands lightly resting on the back of her chair. The room fell silent. Even my father, who rarely lifted his gaze from his plate during meals, looked up with a mix of curiosity and unease. "There's something I need to say," Marion began, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. She glanced around the table, meeting each of our eyes for a moment before moving on. "It's been on my heart for a long time, and I can't keep it to myself any longer." A knot tightened in my stomach. Was she about to share devastating news? A health issue? A decision to move halfway across the world? My mind raced through possibilities, each more dramatic than the last. Marion took a deep breath, her hands gripping the back of her chair. "I know I stepped into this family as an outsider," she said, her voice soft but steady. "And I know I've tried to be what I thought you all needed. A good wife to your father, a gracious host, someone who wouldn't disrupt the lives you had before I came along. But in doing that, I've held back parts of myself. And I think it's time I stopped." She paused, her eyes locking onto mine. "Charlotte," she said, and something in her tone made my breath catch. "I've wanted to tell you this for years. Your mother and I, we knew each other." The words hung in the air, heavy and electric. My fork clattered onto my plate. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "We were friends," Marion said, a faint smile crossing her lips. "Long before she met your father. In fact, she introduced me to him." I stared at her, my mind reeling. My mother had never mentioned Marion. Not once. And yet here she was, claiming not only to have known her but to have played a role in one of the most important relationships of my mother's life. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" Jack asked, suspicion creeping into his voice. Marion's smile faded. "Because it felt like her story to tell, not mine. And when she passed, I didn't know how to bring it up without feeling like I was intruding on her memory. But it's been weighing on me, especially as I've grown closer to all of you. I didn't want this to be a secret anymore." The room fell silent, except for the faint crackle of the fireplace. I didn't know what to feel. Anger at the years of silence? Gratitude for her honesty? Or an overwhelming sadness at the reminder of my mother's absence? Maybe all three at once. What was she like? I found myself asking, my voice trembling. Marion's eyes softened, and for the first time that evening she seemed entirely at ease. "She was remarkable," she said warmly. Smart, funny, fiercely loyal. She had a way of making everyone around her feel seen and valued. It's one of the reasons I admired her so much. As she spoke, the tension in the room began to dissolve, replaced by a quiet, collective yearning to know more. Marian shared stories, some funny, some poignant, about my mother's younger years, painting a picture of a woman I had only known through the lens of motherhood. It was like meeting her all over again through someone else's eyes. By the time the evening ended, I felt an unexpected sense of peace. Marian's revelation, while shocking, had bridged a gap I hadn't even realized existed. It reminded me that family isn't just about shared blood or history. It's about the connections we choose to nurture and the truths we dare to share. As I drove home that night, autumn leaves swirling in the headlights, I reflected on the complexities of love and memory. Marian had taken a risk by opening up to us, and in doing so she had given us a gift. She had shown me that even in the most unexpected moments, there's room for growth, understanding, and the kind of emotional depth that turns an ordinary dinner into something extraordinary.